Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we're going to bust some cryptozoology science on you. I give you Reverend Matt's Monster Science.
Someone's tiny cups. Higher. Thank you. I was kidding. Yes. Oh, that's bad. Is that? Yeah, that'd be fine with me. Thank you. Well, that's my set, everybody. Thanks very much. Thank you. There are 16 times more people than I thought would be here. I expected the left half of one person. Hi. Part 1. I'm Reverend Matt, and I'd like to talk to you about a specific form of ancient Greek exercise. The ancient Greeks were very into exercise, you can tell just by looking at them. I mean, this gentleman right here is a priest, and those are his 2 little sons, and they are all as toned as anything, and covered in snakes, but that's a topic for another time. Seriously, you've got to work at this. These are not the bodies of people who are watching their cholesterol. These are people who want to look good while administering the will of the divine, or going to the beach, or being anguished about all the snakes. And of course the ancient Greeks invented the Olympics, which even now, 65 million years later, is the gold standard for athleticism. Supposedly invented by Hercules in Latin. Oh, sorry. There we go. The original Olympics featured a variety of events, but could never have imagined the modern Olympics, in which the finest practitioners of table tennis, beach volleyball, and something on the Olympics website called Skeleton that I'm afraid to click on, gather from all points in the globe and generally lose to the nations with the most money to throw at it. But no iteration of the Olympics has featured the most flat-out baller of all forms of ancient Greek athletics. I speak, of course, of Centaur wrestling. Now, centaurs, we all know what a centaur... What? I'm behind. There we go. Other way. Centaurs. We all know what a centaur is. It's a horse, only instead of its head and neck, it has the torso, arms, and head of a man. In this case, Tim Tebow. That's John Elway on his back. Individually or in groups, they were the children of all manner of pairings of gods and nymphs and humans and horses. So basically in ancient Greece, some kids were born with red hair, some were born left-handed, and some were born with almost a whole horse instead of legs. In spite of this, they were considered a race of beings, and unusually for mythological races, which were normally just groups of identical entities, the centaurs varied widely in character. Some were kind and wise, like Pholus or Chiron, who was a teacher to Jason and Achilles and Asclepius and all sorts of guys like that, basically a Greek Yoda. A lot of the others, though, were a good deal wilder, with a strong taste for wine and women. Especially women, actually, which is very important not to think too much about. Anyway, all of this leaves us with plenty of reasons why you might want to wrestle a centaur, though, frankly, it does seem like a bad idea, because you're wrestling a horse, only the horse also has arms coming out of its neck. But we know that centaur wrestling was a thing because of the famous Elgin marbles, not pictured. These are a collection of statues and other carven decorations that were originally in the Parthenon, but that were taken out and put into the British Museum instead. Some have said that this was tantamount to theft. The British Museum's response to such claims summarizes elegantly as, nuh-uh. Among the Elgin marbles is a series of metopes, which are a sort of wall decoration depicting men just wrestling centaurs. They're all in different positions and such, and it looks for all the world like a guide for how to do this properly, because some people just need a different sort of advice than others. Of course, this is not what is actually being depicted. Instead, these metopes depict the Centauromachy, or Centaur battle, between the Centaurs and the Lapith people. This battle started at the wedding of the Lapith king Pirithous to Hippodamia. The Centaurs were there because they'd been invited, which probably took some negotiation, you know? Well, if you're going to invite your Aunt Betsy, then I get to invite a whole bunch of human-animal hybrids. Well, the Centaurs got into the wine, and things got unruly, and they tried to carry off the women at the wedding, prompting the Lapiths to grapple with them in a huge multi-species squared circle. So that's what this part of the Elgin Marbles are actually about. But then, of course, legends frequently have morals, don't they? Things to teach us. And so I think this is how to wrestle Centaur's interpretation still stands. So let's have a look at their techniques. We'll start off with the classic I'm sorry. We'll start off here with the classic headlock here administered while apparently attempting to sit on the horseback part. And it could be argued that sitting on a horse's back is not always the best way to subdue it, but I don't want to tell the Lapiths how to do their job. Certainly going for the neck is a good idea. Fighting an opponent of this power, you want to strike at vulnerable areas. This idea is borne out in our second technique, the left cross to the neck. Here we see that we're no holds barred, as it were, the ultimate fighting championship style of the sweet science, taking our opponent out by any means at our disposal. Which brings us to the kick to the groin, or the knee to the groin while being strangled. Now, the problem here is that I don't think that's really the groin, do you? The sculptures certainly don't put any genitalia there, but maybe it's still a vulnerable spot on centaurs. Science has lost this information. Or maybe the Lapiths were just a when in doubt, need of the jewels sort of people. Adding to the list of indignities, the fragmentation makes it difficult to see exactly what's going on here, but it looks as though the Lapith is pulling the centaur's hair, mainly. They had different ideas about masculinity and honor in those days, you see. I have no idea what's going on in this one. Here we probably have a cautionary tale, a what not to do. Do not lie down underneath the centaur. Not the road to victory. On the other side of the coin, though, we have what I believe to be the most effective of all the depicted attacks. Down on one knee, punch to the rib cage, but more importantly to that, not even looking at the centaur while you're doing it. Just impassively staring off to the side as you attack, like you don't even care. That's psychological warfare. Messing with the head of your opponent. That's how you win at centaur wrestling. Truly, the ancients were masters of this dangerous but exciting sport. Now, if only they had developed similar techniques against the snakes. Part 2. Hi, I'm Reverend Matt. And as one of Southern Minnesota's top 10 monster-based comedians, it was inevitable. It was in Minnesota Monthly. It was inevitable that someone would bring to my attention a few months ago the independent presidential candidate Andrew Basiago. I was made aware of him via this graphic, which, for those of you not finished reading it yet, says, Sasquatch exists, I know. I am the first U.S. presidential candidate since Theodore Roosevelt to declare publicly that I have encountered Sasquatch. TR's encounter occurred when a Sasquatch was scared into his campsite one night when he was on his Great North American Ape Expedition. I encountered an adult male Sasquatch and his young son when I was camping at Lake Sakandanga in the Adirondacks in 1966. The Sasquatch have matrilineal DNA that is human and patrilineal DNA from an unknown primate. The president should protect the Sasquatch by putting them on the endangered species list. Needless to say, I was enchanted. Finally, a candidate who spoke to my needs, so of course I dug further. This image, I discovered, was merely one of exactly 100 similar, which he called his 100 proposals. Sadly, only one dealt with Sasquatch, a violation of the public trust if ever there was one. Luckily, several dealt with extraterrestrials, including one citing 57 extraterrestrial species visiting our planet, including the reptilians, the Nordics, there we go. The reptilians, the Nordics, the small greys, and the tall greys. This sub-taxonomy of the greys was new to me, though I can only assume the tall greys are superior intellectually and morally. But otherwise, he was very much in keeping with standard UFO lore. He was especially interested in hidden government technology, having personally visited Mars with Barack Obama in the 1980s. This early presidential association, no doubt, came about because government chronovisor technology had revealed that he, Andrew Basiago, would be elected president sometime between 2016 and 2028. As all presidents, he tells us, have their future presidency revealed to them. And surely we have enough problems thinking our votes are meaningless without time travel-based predestination, but here we are. And indeed, Basiago's involvement with shadowy government laboratories reaches all the way back to when he was a young scamp of 10, when he was part of Project Pegasus, a teleportation project of which he was a test subject. Now, there are those who might say testing teleportation on 10-year-olds is monumentally irresponsible. But to those people, I say two things. One, surely US government black projects would never do anything irresponsible. And two, have you seen Sasquatch? No? His primary interest in most of these cases was disclosure. He knew the government knew, and he wanted them to tell you, because you won't listen to him. Unless he's the president. Because everyone always listens to the president. I make fun, but in fact, he wasn't wrong. The list went on, of course. He was keen to resolve basic cosmological mysteries and went on. These mysteries include whether the Earth is round or flat, whether the Earth is solid or hollow, whether NASA landed men on the moon or hoaxed the lunar landings, and whether the cosmos is natural and organic or artificial and holographic. Extremely important questions to 100% of Americans, and so, watch this. Round, solid you idiot, not a hoax, what is wrong with you, and whoa, dude. Incidentally, there is nothing I love more about people who are into unexplained phenomena than their propensity to simultaneously question the moon landings and tell us Barack Obama went to Mars 30 years ago. But anyway. I would also like to mention that Basiago... I skipped. There we go. I would also like to mention that Basiago was super into eggs, believing they are essential to human intellect, and stating national literacy rates are directly correlated with national rates of daily per capita egg consumption. So either eating eggs teaches you to read, or the ability to read exposes you to text-based pro-egg propaganda. Now, it's easy to mock all this, and that's why I'm doing it. It's easy. Super easy. But in fact, only 20% of his proposals dealt with things that maybe aren't real, a figure that was super easy to arrive at since he has exactly 100 of them. And for that, the American people thank him. The remaining 80% had to do with actual government things. He was an iconoclast here as well, at least a bit. He proposed eliminating all taxes and replacing them with a single tax on bank withdrawals, a system impossible to game unless cash exists. He wanted to deny gun ownership to the violent, which sounds good on the surface, though it does occur to me that the non-violent maybe don't need too many guns. But beyond this, fully 49% of his proposals, and again, America thanks him, were what many would consider straightforward progressive or left-wing. He was anti-fracking, wanted banks and police departments to be held accountable, believed in a guaranteed income, was unsurprisingly into Edward Snowden, specifically called for improved conditions for women and indigenous people, believed in marijuana legalization. I keep falling behind on this one. But we'll just go to that one. Referred to dolphins as human beings of the sea. Believed in marijuana legalization again. For real, he called it the natural God-given herb cannabis. But also for real, I would totally have voted for him. We could have done worse, and of course, did. Now, he wasn't pure Bernie plus time travel. He also called for the fortifying of America's coastal defenses and a moratorium on all immigration. He was an anti-vaxxer. He was a man who had his own ideas. He worked in defiance of received wisdom, whether that be the two-party system or the perception of a generally space alien-free America. Outside of this iconoclasm, this looking in from the inside, I of course do not mean to propose that alternate party enthusiasts are similar to people who have questions about the hollow earth. Maybe someone somewhere is proposing this, but as Andrew Basiago has demonstrated, people propose a lot of things. Part 3. Hi, I'm Reverend Matt. And I'm here to talk to you about the largest insect that ever lived. The largest insect that ever lived was Meganeura, which was a dragonfly with a 26-inch wingspan, making it about the size of a crow. Thank you. Good night. No, okay. Let's talk a bit about Meganeura. Meganeura was not technically a dragonfly, but it was very closely related to them and physically extremely similar. So it may be presumed that it adopted the lifestyle choice of a dragonfly, making it an airborne predator. It lived on other insects and on small amphibians. It grabbed the former right out of the air. It did not grab the amphibians out of the air because, of course, they were, for the most part, not airborne. Unless they were hurled into the air by other amphibians. A scenario that paleontologists believe to have been infrequent. So most likely, science. So most likely, Meganeura descended on the amphibians and picked them up and flew off to devour at its leisure, a scenario both nightmarish and hilarious. What's unfortunate is that there weren't any flying vertebrates during this time, no birds or bats or pterosaurs for the Meganeuras to take in midair. Because if a Meganeura were to see a sparrow flying through the air, it would just fly up and grab it and eat it right there in the sky, and man, dang. But alas, this was not to be, because Meganeura lived about 300 million years ago in the late Carboniferous period. This is tens of millions of years before the dinosaurs or the first pterosaurs, and the birds would be tens of millions of years after that, and so on. The Carboniferous period was an age of prehistory that was extremely uninteresting. This was not an age of dinosaurs, but rather an age of salamanders. This is really all there is by way of terrestrial vertebrates. There were a few small, simple reptiles, but other than that, salamanders, teeming hordes of salamanders, nothing but salamanders as far as the eye could see, each more boring than the last. A couple of them were 15 feet long, but most of them weren't, and all of them were slow, blunt, moist, lizardy things. None of them had fangs or horns or armor or guns or anything. Meganeura was doing the world a favor by existing right then. There were actually a lot of tedious eras. After the dinosaurs were killed by outer space, there were a couple of millions of years of basically groundhogs and sheep. Not amazing, unless you're amazed by groundhogs and sheep. I'm not here to judge. Though none of this applies to the actual Mesozoic. All 180 million years or so of that were basically incredible. Now, of course, the question about Meganeura is, how did it get so big? Well, for the answer to this, as well as the answer to so many of life's questions, we look to the 1997 movie Mimic, starring Mira Sorvino, which won a large number of Academy Awards in a dream I had one time. I was very proud. In this film, Sorvino's character, an action entomologist, does a field dissection of a human-sized insect and looks up and says, with profundity, "Peter, these are lungs." But of course, you all know this. It's one of the great cinematic quotes. Make him an offer he can't refuse. Luke, I am your father. Peter, these are lungs. And this is accurate. Of course it is. It's Mimic. It has generally been held that insects don't get large because they don't have lungs. Rather, they get oxygen by just sort of letting air waft gently through them, which is fine if you're very small, but which doesn't get the amounts of oxygen in there necessary for larger masses. Unless you're in the Carboniferous period, where there's more oxygen in the actual air than there is now. And more oxygen means that the lazy, slacking insect respiratory system can get the oxygen it needs to get big. This has always been the default explanation for Meganeura's gigantism, but there is a problem with it. That problem is a relative of Meganeura that lived almost 50 million years after it, right before the Mesozoic and the late Permian period. This Meganeuroid was not as large as Meganeura itself, having an 18-inch wingspan, but that's still really too much dragonfly. An embarrassment. An embarrassment of dragonfly. No, I can't accept this. And it lived at a time when oxygen levels had fallen off to more modern levels. So this brings Meganeura's gigantism back into question. One explanation might be that it got so big simply because it could. It was not too long after the last known Meganeurid that the first pterosaurs appeared. Perhaps the giant dragonflies got so big simply because this was the time that they had the opportunity to do so, when the ecological niche of large airborne predator was theirs for the taking. But then perhaps they were outcompeted and supplanted by a new flyer, much as the pterosaurs themselves would be outcompeted and supplanted for the most part by birds well in advance of the Cretaceous extinction. And the moral of that is that awesome doesn't always win at evolution, and that's why I don't have bat wings. It's always been remarkable to me that something as impressive as a real giant dragonfly isn't better known. There's really only one movie in which it figures prominently, that being the Japanese film Gojira X Megagirasu, and that's the Roman letter X there, which translates into English as Godzilla X Megagirus. I don't really know what the X there is all about. It's not mutants or porn or buried treasure. This was the 24th Godzilla movie, and I think the actual for-real explanation of the X was that they got tired of saying verses, or tai in Japanese. This movie was released theatrically in Japan in the year 2000, and in the US, never ever ever. And in spite of the ready availability of CGI technology, it still involved Godzilla being played by a dude in a suit. Because in Japan, they know that a dude in a suit is just what Godzilla looks like. Anyway, in Gojira X Megagiras, an anti-Godzilla task force going by the frankly inexplicable name of the G-Graspers comes up with the means of getting rid of Godzilla once and for all. They're going to build a gun that shoots black holes. Everyone's really embarrassed that nobody thought of this before. It's so simple, and nothing can go wrong. I mean, is it even possible for something to go wrong with a plan like that? So they test it, and a space-time anomaly is created, and a Meganeura flies out and drops off an egg sac and flies back to its own time. Then, a small boy picks up the egg sac and brings it to Tokyo, where he puts it in the city sewer system. Is everyone with me so far? It's one of the basic, timeless stories. It's one of the archetypes. Anyway, the eggs start hatching, and the Meganeuras come out and start attacking people because they're extremely vicious and basically human-sized. This is not the only paleontological inaccuracy in this film. For one thing, there's their whole life cycle. They start off as these sort of war insects called meganeulons, whereas actual dragonfly young are called nymphs, after the mythological Greek nature spirit women who were renowned for their beauty. Entomologists, you're weird. For another, the Meganeuras all serve a queen of sorts called Megagirus, in spite of the fact that actual dragonflies, and presumably Meganeuras, have no such social structure. And then there's Megagirus herself. She's got a vertebrate jaw full of teeth, and an extra pair of legs beyond the usual six that are sort of like praying mantis limbs and crab claws combined. She's missing a set of wings, and the pair she does have just flap slowly and shallowly, while she is held in the air by nothing in particular. Unless you count the strings that are sometimes visible. And guys, I'm 100% cool with Godzilla looking like a man in a suit, but this is the year 2000. Guys, come on. Also, Megagirus, scientifically, is a little bit on the big side. Not strictly accurate. But then this is explained in the movie. The Meganeuras go and find Godzilla and suck his energy out with their abdomens, and then go and inject it into Megagirus. And that part is accurate. It's a small field, insect Godzilla ecology, and frankly, underfunded. But it has a bright future. Also, in one English translation of this movie, the Meganeura is said to have lived not in the Carboniferous period, but the Carnivorous period. An altogether different and frankly more terrifying age of prehistory. Also, of course, one that was not real. And a 2-foot-wide dragonfly may not look like much against a 100-foot one with an alligator mouth and giant claws that it uses to fight Godzilla, but it was completely real, and that will always be more awesome. Thank you.